Okay, Josh, what makes you happy?
What makes me happy is being a role model to other people.
Good. Okay, Josh, do you have any special talents?
Yes, I am a great soccer player,
Cool. How long have you been playing soccer?
probably for 7 years.
Wow, that's a long time. Do you have any aspirations to become a pro soccer player one day?
I want to play for FC Barcelona and Sporting Kansas City.
Sweet, buddy. So, Josh, one day you're going to grow up. If there's one thing you could do when you grow up, what would that be?
Be a professional soccer player.
Awesome. Yeah, you just spoke about that, so that was cool. Thank you for sharing. If there was one thing in the world that you could learn how to do, what would it be?
Be the kindest person
Cool. Why would you want to be the kindest person?
because I wanted to be treated fair and kind back.
Cool. What is your first memory of books?
Well, I used to hate books, but now, I'm starting to like them. The first book I think that that I can remember is Cat in the Hat books.
Cool. Do you remember where you first saw them? Was it at school or at home?
At home.
Awesome, buddy.
I think reading has been easier for me because I've been trying hard and learning new words, so it becomes easier on the way to reading, and hopefully I'll become a good reader when I'm older.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite book?
Wonder.
What?
I like that book because it's a great book.
All right, last question, Josh. If you have any advice to give to our young kindergarten students here at LFE, what advice would you give them?
I would give them, tell them to never give up and always try your hardest, because if you give up and never try, you won't be a successful person in life.
That is a really good answer, Josh. Thanks for taking time to answer our questions. I know you're going to be a huge inspiration to other kids when you leave Longview. So I really, really appreciate it, Josh. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Dr. R, really appreciate you doing this episode with Josh. It's really, really super cool. The first question I have for you is, what is your earliest memory of reading or interacting with books?
I can remember specifically. I think it was in a fourth grade class, and I remember that first time that I completed a book, that I made it from cover to cover, and how I felt like that was a really big accomplishment because I remembered the story, I could retell the story, and it just felt like a really big accomplishment that I made it through, and you know. For me, it was like one of those books that I called, it was a big book, it was a thick book, and I just kind of always doubted myself, like not knowing for sure if I could ever get to that place where I could read and understand what I was reading, and I kind of compared myself to friends around me, and I knew that maybe I wasn't at quite the same level as they were, so I always kind of doubted myself. But so it was a sense of accomplishment for me, and that's really the vivid memory that I have when it comes to being able to accomplish something as a reader. And that's the first book. Of course, I read little books, when I was a little kid, and people read books to me, but that was the first one that I felt that I really kind of conquered myself individually as a reader.
Awesome. All right. The next question we have for you, Dr. R, is, was learning to read easy or difficult for you?
Oh, it was very hard. Reading was really, really hard for me. I would read things and I could not remember what I read. I would take tests. I did not do well on tests. I remember at that time we had it was called an SRA kit. And so in our reading classroom, there was a box, and you would have to go up to the box, and the box was split into colors, like green and red, blue, like 20 some colors. And you had to pass each color before you could go to the next one. And what you did is you went up and you got this little two-fold story, and you would have to read the story, and then you had to take a 10-question test over what you read, and then you went up to the box and you pulled out the answer key and you graded yours. And I dreaded that because I could rarely pass those things. I had a very, very hard time learning to read. And I remember that friends around me, they would go up and they would be in level pink, level violet, and those were like the high levels. And so what that was telling me is they would read things and they could understand it and answer questions on it, and it didn't seem to be much of a problem for them. For me, it was super, super hard, and I just had to, over the course of time, I had to just continue working on it. And what did help me is when I started reading, because these were stories that I knew nothing about. They were stories that I thought were kind of silly. I didn't really care a whole lot about these stories. But what started to kind of make a difference for me is when I was able to read things that I liked, maybe things that I picked, maybe things I was interested in. And so for me, at least, that was motivating. And so I could at least kind of plow through it. And it was just over the course of time and having really good teachers that would help me and that would be patient with me because they knew I was trying hard. But learning to read for me was really difficult.
All right, I really appreciate you sharing your journey of learning to read, Dr. R. I think the kids will find it very inspiring. This is going to lead into my next question, or Josh's next question, which is, what is your favorite book?
Well, I talked earlier about that first book that I read from cover to cover, and that was a Little House book. It was Little House in the Big Woods, and I think what attracted me to that book was at the time there was a series on TV, and it was Little House on the Prairie series. So like every week there was an episode that you would watch on TV. So I was familiar with the characters. I was familiar with like the setting of where those books took place. And so I think maybe what attracted me to those Little House books was that I kind of already knew a little bit about what I was going to read about. And so I think that gave me some confidence. And then also I remember that book had, when I opened it, again, I told you earlier, it was a thick book, and that made me feel pretty good. But what was also great is that it had big print. It was not one of those thick books that had tiny print in it that looked for me to be kind of overwhelming. It had big print, and so I thought that would be helpful for me. And so that would be easily the book that I would identify as that's my favorite book. And I think it was because I liked the story, I liked the series, but it was the first time I felt successful as a reader.
Awesome. All right, Dr. R. One thing that I always tell the kids when I'm working with them in this environment is I always tell them that reading is lifelong. So Mr. Saunders is always reading stuff and always learning. And I always tell them that reading always impacts my life. So that kind of leads into our next question that we have for you, which is, how has learning to read impacted your life, especially now as the principal here at LFE?
Well, as I was a kid and growing up, I found myself more reading kind of for pleasure. Of course, outside of when school would assign things and I would have to read things for assignments. But then as I moved into being an adult, and I kind of have to answer this, Josh, a little bit with writing as well. I was not a strong reader and I was not a strong writer. But for me, the turnaround kind of came when I went to college. I actually had a college professor who, on my first piece of writing in college, made a really negative statement about my writing. It was like really negative about my writing. And it told me, it kind of made me just feel like I was unable to write and communicate through writing. But at that time, I was older, And so it kind of served as motivation for me. So then what I found is that, the more I went into college and took college classes and decided I wanted to be a teacher, I realized that not only is reading and writing important for teachers to be able to work with students, but I also knew that in that profession, I was going to have to use my voice, my eyes, and my hands in order to communicate with other people. So I had to become a stronger writer and a stronger communicator in terms of my speech. But there are so many things now that in order to make a good decision about them, whether it's for the school, whether it's for Mr. Saunders, or whether it's for you as a student, I have to be able to read something and I have to be able to process it and think about it and then decide what to do based on it. There's times, Josh, I remember you've written me letters and notes about things that have either happened at school or just things you want to communicate with me, and I have to read that and I have to absorb it and process it and think about it in order to give you any kind of support, guidance, advice, or direction. So as a principal and as a teacher, it really has just helped me become a better decision maker, because I have to kind of read for understanding and see where I can go as a principal in order to support or offer advice to whomever it is that's communicating with me. So as a reader, it plays a big part in my role as a principal and in my role as a dad for my own daughter.
All right. Last question.
Last one.
You finally got to the end. Do you have any words of wisdom for our young scholars here at LFE that are just now learning how to read?
Learning how to read. Like I said, for some people it's going to be simple. It's going to feel easy for them. For others, it's going to feel really hard, and you're going to feel like, I don't like to read. I don't care about reading. You're going to have those feelings. I did. And my advice is you just plow through it. You just you have to know that it's going to get easier. It's going to get better. It's just like with experience. If you're in a sport or if something that you really enjoy doing, you get better as you practice it. I think it's the same with reading. You just got to keep practicing it. Don't try to do too much too soon. Don't try to read a whole book. If you can't, set a goal. Read a couple of pages. Could you understand what those pages are? That's totally what I had to do. Those SRA things that I was telling you about earlier, where I had to go up and read. Eventually, I was able to move up some of those levels, but I couldn't do it the same way my other friends could. I had to break those things down. So you just have to keep trying, and the thing that's great is that as you get older, you're going to want to read because you're going to find some interest in something that you really love, and the only way you can learn more about it is by reading about it. So just keep going. I know in school you have to read some boring stories and some boring things that teachers give you. I know that's just part of it, but just know that beyond that are those things where you become the decision maker about what you read, and you become the deciding factor of what you're going to read. And I think that's where you'll have that increased motivation, and I think you'll feel like, wow, I made it over that hump, and reading is not so bad, and I'm a pretty strong reader now. So that'd be my advice to you as a Longview Farm kid.
Well, thank you for taking the time, Dr. R. I know you're a very busy guy, and I know you've got a ton of stuff to do on this Wednesday morning, but for me personally, I'm glad you took the time, because you've been not only a good friend to me, but a colleague and someone that I admire and respect. And I'm going to take 2 minutes to say, just on the official episode, that you will be dearly missed next year, but I am so thankful and blessed to have worked with you for these last 7 years.
Awesome.
So
I feel the same way, Mr. Saunders.
thank you for your time, buddy.
You got it.
And I know,
see you, Joshua.
I know Josh is going to appreciate it too. He's super excited to see this.
Peace out, brother.